Good morning, or good afternoon, or good evening, bot builders, depending on what time it is for you in the world where you are. I hope you are having a lovely morning, or day, or night, again, depending on the magic of time zones. Today we have a lovely stream prepared for all of you. Welcome. If you're new here, my name is Robert. These are the Botpress Basics office hours. I host them once a week, every Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'll tell you a bit about the way that we run these streams typically, and then we'll dive right into the project we have set up for us today. So usually I come in with something like a lesson or a couple of things that I want to cover for this week, typically based on conversations I've had throughout the previous week on our Discord channel, on things like the help channel, or just around the server in general, based on the kinds of questions that you guys have. And then, of course, the main purpose of interacting together live is that I can answer your questions. So please, if you're in the audience and you've got a question, do try to derail me, because it is 100% the purpose of these streams. So if you've got a question, don't be shy, go ahead and ask, and we will go ahead and work through some bot building things together. So that's how we run these streams. That's how we'll be together for the next, usually about 45 minutes. But I have something a little special, or perhaps a little different, planned for us today. So let's go ahead and dive right into today's activity, let's say. So let's take a gander. Ayush, I see your question. I'm just going to run through the plan for today, and then I'll get to your question in a sec. All right. So over the weekend, I saw a question from a comment on YouTube that kind of just stuck with me, that I couldn't stop thinking about. And the person was like, I want to create a bot that will run my students or users or whatever through a quiz that will then like assign them points and then give them a grade. And I thought, what an interesting use case for a bot that you can pop onto a website, or like even like a WhatsApp channel for your class or whatever it is that you're teaching, and then have each of your students interact with it, get a grade, and then you don't even have to lift a finger. You don't even have to do the grading yourself. I've got lots of teachers in my life, so the idea of not having to grade something seems nice. You could, in theory, do this with something like Google Forms, but I like the idea of the conversational interface. I think that there's like a nice not double-edged, but like a double use case here, in that you are providing your students with a quiz, but then you are also teaching them something about conversational AI, or interacting with them in a way that they're more familiar with. Pretty much everybody uses ChatGPT these days, mate. Ashwin, sorry, you like totally infected my brain there. But everyone uses ChatGPT these days, and I thought the idea of interacting with students in a way that was conversational and more familiar with them might be enjoyable, or it might be nice. So that's what we have in front of us today. I'm going to run through the bot, and then we're going to rebuild it below. So that is the plan for today. But before we jump into that, Ayush says, I was stuck on a problem and I caught the last stream on querying KBs. Long story short, you you didn't even have a question. You got the thing done and you got a job offer, Ayush. That's awesome. I'm really glad to hear that. Ayush, if you want to maybe write a little message in the Discord channel, I'd love to hear more about your job offer. We're all about building community here, so don't feel like you shouldn't share. I would love to hear more about this. Yeah, congrats, as Ashwin says. Alrighty, so let's dive into, if you are the YouTube user who left this comment, and I'm so sorry, I don't have your username prepared, but if you're watching this in the future on YouTube, hello, welcome. I'm glad you're watching this recording. Come join us on Discord sometime. We have a great time. I hope you find this useful, and of course you can make changes as time goes on. Pro tip for a sec, for those of you who do not know this, you can hide the card tray by unpinning it, by clicking the pin there, and then you've got more space to work with here. Okay, let's dive right in. So what I'm going to do is I'll go through each node and each card, we'll test the bot together, see how it works, and then we'll rebuild it one by one. I thought this is different than how I normally run these. I thought it might be useful to see the big picture first before we build, and then build it together to see how I set up each card. I don't know if you'll find this useful, so let me know in a comment or in the audience if that's something that you find useful. Can you export and share the finished bot? Yeah, I can, totally. Real intel, perhaps I'll do that at the end of the stream just to make sure that everything's working properly, and you can all get the BPC. Again, if you're watching this on YouTube, I will do my utmost to remember to include that in the description of the video. All right, so here's how the bot works. First, it's going to ask you for your name. It's going to ask your student for their name. We're saving this to the student name variable, which is the person name, pre-selected or pre-created card. You'll see that it's not a string variable, but is instead a JavaScript object. That's because we save the first and last name separately. I see this question often. Why do we do that? It's so you can access or reference the first or last name separately. For example, you could do Mr. or Mrs. and then reference their last name, or you could just refer to their first name if you want it to be a bit more casual or informal or conversational. There's a video on our YouTube channel about how to access that, but if you're familiar with JavaScript object notation, that one should come easily to you. All right, let us continue. So collect the student's name, you save it to the student name variable, done. Then just a simple step in most kind of like, I'll say high stakes bot projects. So like I think a quiz or a test in the world of school can be pretty high stakes. So I'm going to go ahead and say pretty high stakes here, is that you want to give the user or the chatter or the student in this case the ability to kind of opt out or tell them they're not ready to begin the test. So first we ask, are you ready to begin? Yes or no. You'll notice I'm not saving this answer to a variable. It's not really necessary at this point. If they say that they're not ready, they just get sent to a node where we tell them, okay, let us know when you're ready to begin, wait for user input, and then an AI transition card that will just categorize that message. So if they're ready to begin, whatever they send that message, it'll shoot them up right here. Okay, and then the thing actually begins. The test starts, the quiz starts. So we send a message that says, let's get started. And this is kind of the meat and potatoes of this bot. So what we've seen up until now is pretty standard stuff. But this this interaction down here is the kind of meat and potatoes here. I thought that this was a really great bot project to kind of run through as like, this might be the first thing that you build, or this might be like your introduction to Botpress, because it shows you a bunch of different things, AI transition, capture cards, and then most importantly, one of my favorite cards is the execute code card, because it makes very simple coding tasks executed through code, available to you and your bot in a very approachable way. So again, maybe a little history lesson here. Before visual flow editors like this one, you would have had to write all of the things that you see in front of you, so the nodes and cards, completely in code. We don't want all of that to appear. We want to make some of the process simpler, but sometimes it's really, the flexibility of the execute code block is really nice. So today, I think if you take one thing away from this and you're a beginner of Botpress, I would love it to be a lack of fear of the execute code card. Okay, so let's dive in. So the first thing we do is we ask them a question. In this case, I'll call this question 1, and we save that answer in a variable called response1. This is a multiple choice test or quiz, but of course you could do this with short answers. Long answers might be a bit tough. Maybe I'll leave that for another day, but for stuff like multiple choice, that's what we're doing here. So you save the value in the variable response1, and they can select A, B, or C. Presumably one of these is right. I gave myself a little bit of a curveball when building this bot project because I wanted to offer the ability to provide partial credits or partial grades. So in theory, what would happen is you would be able to say like 5 points or 50% of the points for the partially correct answer, and then 10 points or 100% of the points for the totally correct answer. And then maybe you want to provide a gradient there as well. I think that is a lot nicer than kind of a just kind of binary yes or no, correct, false. And it gives you more flexibility in the way that you design this test if you're an educator, let's say. So let's hop into the real thing, the thing that teaches your bot to determine did the student select the right answer or not. This is a very simple if-then logic workflow. So if the value of workflow.response1, that's the JavaScript name for the variable response1, remember that's where we're saving the answer, then the value of some variable called workflow.score is set to a number based on what they've selected. So in this case, B would have been the totally correct answer, A would have been the partially correct answer, and C would have been the completely incorrect answer. So what we're doing here is we're taking the variable workflow.score and setting it equal to a certain number based on what they sent for response 1, what the value of response 1 is. I need to I need to come clean here for a sec and let you know that I cheated a bit and I just used the generate code option here. So I actually didn't come up with this on my own. It's not very complicated. It's like the simplest thing you could possibly write. And I didn't even have to do it myself. You can write a little prompt up here like you would prompt ChatGPT for code, and then your bot will just write the code for you. So easy peasy. The prompt in this case might look something like if the value of workflow.response1 is A, set the value of workflow.score equal to 5. Okay, so that's the first thing. And then you might assume correctly that the other two look the same, and they do, with one key difference. So let's take a look. Response 2, this is question 2, so we say that the student's response in the variable workflow.response2, that's the second one. And then we do the exact same mechanism for calculating the score. But we do one key difference. Because at this point in the bot's flow, workflow.score already has a value, we can't just reset that value to something else, and we can't change it every time. So we've got to do something a little different. So in this case, we're just adding. So you'll notice the addition of a plus sign here, and that's all that needs to exist. So in this case, we have if the value of workflow.response2 is A, B, or C, then add a certain amount to the value of workflow.score. So this will just take that extant value you already have and add a certain amount to it. So in this case, we've got C would have been the correct answer, B would have been incorrect, and A would have been partially correct. And of course, you can customize that based on what you need. And finally, response 3 is the exact same thing. So we ask them a question, we do it again, and then and then we set the value again. Actually, looks like there's a small mistake here. But these ones should be response 3. Look at that, troubleshooting together. Okay, and then of course, this was 3 questions on this test, but you can include any number of questions that you like just by repeating the number of incremental or additive steps that you have. All right. Ashwin says, is there any way to limit my individual users to a certain number of queries per day or something like that? So the simple way is no, because I think what you would like to say is like, if it's a known IP address, turn the bot off or like disallow them from entering. So I'm going to say that the simple answer is no. The complex answer is if you've got a database of users that you're maybe authenticating in some way, or you are asking the user maybe to provide like an email address, you can cross-reference it against a list of email addresses that you already have and then tell them like they're not allowed to no more conversations that day or something. But those are pretty brittle systems. So I think for all intents and purposes, Ashwin, I'm going to say like a solid no to your question. And if you do figure out a way around this, it would kind of be like a hacky workaround and not something that's particularly like a native or simple solution within Botpress. All right. So let's the quiz is not done here. The test is not done. So there's a couple of things I want to cover here before we finish up. So finally, we show them the final score on the quiz. You can say workflow.score, and since this is a number variable, you can maybe say like out of possible 30. So that would be the value they got for the score of their test, and then out of 30. And then the important bit here is we have an insert record card. We save the values of these to a table. So if you're a teacher later on, all you need to do is hop into that table, see what your students got, and then pop that into your gradebook or similar. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm saving this to something called quiz table, and this is what the responses would look like. So we see the final score here. I got a measly 5 out of 30. These were my responses on each question, and of course, this table can grow based on how many questions it is that you have or you want to ask. And then the final the final part of this bot is just a simple expression card. I threw this in because if you're new to Botpress, it's really valuable to learn how these expression cards work. They just allow you to define the conditions for a transition. So here, if the value of workflow.score is less than or equal to 0, greater than or equal to 0, then less than or equal to 9. So between 0 and 9, you get sent to a node that says you're failing, and then other relevant messages based on the grade that you received on your quiz. Okay, so that is the entirety of the bot here. There's not much else to be seen. So I think we can go ahead and rebuild this at the bottom. But that is the kind of the large and the small of it. Before we go ahead and begin here, Yasmin has a question. How can a bot know if the user is a new user or existed user info in user info table? I want to put this condition if the bot starts. It depends, Yasmin, on what you are, like how you're defining an old user or new user. For instance, do you authenticate them in some way? Do you capture their email address? There's a video on the Botpress YouTube channel about checking if a user input already exists. So in other words, if a user has already provided their email and they provide their email again, you can say something like, hey, we already have that email, welcome back. And then if it doesn't exist, you can save that email to a table and then carry on as usual. So Yasmin, you might find the check if user input already exists video is helpful. I think I uploaded that a couple of months ago. What is time? I don't know. But you may want to begin there. You don't want to ask the user again about their information. So then the question would be like, how would your bot have access to that information? How would your bot know? And then Zane says, if I put insert record card under each raw input, will it help me to catch those who answered only half of my quiz? Zane, that's a good question. I think handling potential misfires on inputs here is something you have to account for when designing this quiz. So in other words, when you say that users who only answered half of your quiz, Zane Bain, do you mean people who left the bot's conversation completely? Or do you mean people who didn't provide an expected answer, so on and so forth? There are a couple of different ways when you're setting up your capture cards to handle that kind of exception, which we can go over in a sec. In fact, we will when we set up those answers. And Christian says, what if I want to evaluate questions with open answers and not multiple choice? Would I ask the bot to give a score to the answer based on knowledge from a KP? So Christian, that one's a bit more difficult because how does your bot know what is correct and what is not correct? So you could pass the answer through something like an AI task and then ask your bot to evaluate it against something else, but that sounds a bit brittle, and that kind of comparative answer is not particularly successful. What I would recommend in that case, and kind of the expected behavior that I would see, is just save the answer to a result in a knowledge base and then manually evaluate it yourself as the teacher. As a previous educator myself, I probably wouldn't leave the evaluation of open-ended questions to something like GPT. I would probably do that on my own. However, everyone's style is different, I suppose. But that's kind of what I would do there. Yeah, Zane, if they left and then not in case of error, then you wouldn't see an entry in their their record for the table at all. What I would recommend, and I wouldn't recommend putting an insert record card after each answer or each message, because that might mess with the integrity of your results. Instead, what I would do is what would I do? I would tell them at the beginning of the bot, you have to complete the conversation in full. Otherwise, none of your answers will count. So this is a note for conversation design. When you are setting the boundaries or the limits of your bot's conversation or the expectations at the beginning, we see a much higher success rate in your completion rate for conversations, for your bot's ability to actually provide any kind of value when your users know what to expect start to finish from a conversation. I hope that made sense. So the idea here is if you're telling the user from the get-go, you have to make it to the end of the quiz, otherwise none of your answers count. That is much more effective than anything else you can do in terms of bot design to actually make sure that your users finish that conversation. So it's all about a give and take or a trade-off between how you design the conversation and what you have your bot do for you. Is there any actual difference between single and multiple choice card? Technically, yes. Ashwin, yes and no. The multiple choice card allows for multiple inputs. So in other words, it will save the answers to an array variable, and then it will save multiple choice answers, i.e. multiple toppings on pizza, only if your user types them into the message. So in other words, if your user is on something like WhatsApp that doesn't provide the ability to select multiple buttons, instead you'll just be able to type in those answers and say I want pepperoni, mushrooms, and cheese on my pizza. And that's how you would get multiple choices and save those to an array variable. I want the bot to check if the user is in the table, the user ID with the hashtag sign set automatically to the table. It's a unique number for each user. Yeah, if you have a way of getting that user ID, then you can absolutely check it against the, and your bot has that like from the beginning of the conversation and it's saved to a table somewhere, you can absolutely check that. You can check that using the method in the check if user input already exists table. Presumably if you already have a variable that is set, you can just say, hey, bot, before you start the conversation, check if X value already exists in table Y. If it does, go here. If it doesn't, go here. If that's the situation you're describing, then absolutely. Okay, let's go ahead and start rebuilding this bot from the beginning. I'll start my first, good luck, Yasmin. Let me know how that goes for you. I'm gonna go ahead and say welcome here, and this will be my first node, and this one is just student name. So this is that person name card that I was talking about earlier. I'll just say, hello, welcome to your quiz. Can I get your name? And this one will be workflow.studentName, and we will turn off knowledge answering here just to be sure. Okay, and then we have a single choice asking our user, great, thanks. Are you ready to begin this quiz? And we've got yes or no answers. Ashwin, maybe an additional note on the question you asked here about the difference between single and multiple choice. You'll see that the single choice answers are saved initially to a string variable. Of course, you could change this, so there really is no difference. It's more just for your convenience, but the single choice will default to a string variable for you. All right, if they're not ready, we'll send them here, and if they are ready, we will send them over here. I'll call this node not ready, oopsie daisy. Get out of here, table. And I'll call this node ready when they are ready. So here, I just sent a simple text message that says, no problem, just let me know when you are. And then this is another note about that conversation design point I was making earlier. One of the things that you want is to coach your users through the conversation with your bot. In this case, I'll be setting up an AI transition that will interpret the user's message to determine if they've sent anything that suggests they're ready or ready to begin, but we can coax them down that road. So in this case, be sure to say something like, I'm ready. And in this case, we're letting them know, like, hey, for this to work, like, let me know when you're ready. We can avoid hallucinations that way. Here, I'm going to use one of my favorite cards of all time, wait for user input. So in this case, this is literally just bot, do not do anything until user says something. And then we'll use the AI transition at the end. The AI transition is like the expression card I discussed at the end of the bot above. But in this case, instead of determining the conditions for a transition through code or something like that, we'll just categorize a piece of text. So we all know that LLMs do really great on semantic tasks or knowledge work like this. In other words, taking a piece of writing and interpreting it. And so what's going to happen is it's going to take the user input, so what the user responds to this question, and then looks if ready to start or begin. It'll check if that person is ready to start or begin, and if they are, they will get sent up here. Ashwin says, I was confused why I couldn't click 2 multiple choice options in the emulator. Now I understand. Yeah, you'll have to type that out there. And again, that's a great moment for your users to say, like, be sure to type out your responses, and we'll be able to capture all those for you. All right, let us continue with this build. I'm going to go ahead and set up what did I set up here? Yeah, just a text message card that says, great, let's go ahead and get started. And as well, I'm going to pop my first execute code card and my first single choice card. So for the single choice card, I'm just going to go ahead and say, I'll call it question 1. And of course, I'll save the response to workflow.response1. And we are going to have 3 possible answers, A, B, and C. Now, you'll notice that on choice cards like this, by default, paths exist, so you can transition users when they select an option. We don't want to provide paths, we just want to collect a value. So if you actually click this, it'll turn from blue to gray, and then you can see those paths, the corresponding paths, disappear. And then this is kind of the meat and potatoes here, is the execute code card. So remember, this is where we're saying if the value of response 1 is equal to something, set the value of workflow.score to something else. Let me show how you might prompt this. This is a really simple if-then statement, but the prompting or generating code works the same way across the board. So if the value of workflow.response1 is equal to A, set the value of workflow.score equal to 10. And I'll say that in this case, obviously A is the correct answer. We accept those changes, we move on, and I'm going to copy and paste this 3 times because we've got, of course, 3 different answers. So we've got if the first statement, if the second statement, and if the third statement. So A, B, and C, and then we just go ahead and change the numbers here. I'll say that B is the incorrect answer and C is the partially correct answer. And we go ahead and close that. And that's it. This is what we have. So it's very simple first step, second step, third step for this test. And then I'm going to go ahead and include the second and third questions as well. So remember, these will look kind of the same, question 2 and question 3. The only thing that's going to change is that, of course, we are adding and not changing the value of workflow.score. If you change the value of workflow.score, you will be negating all of the hard work you did previously, or the hard work that your students will have done. We don't love that. So we've got our cards there. I'll just go ahead and pop my execute cards, my execute code cards in as well. And I'll just go ahead and set these up. And sometimes bot building is a lot of this. It's a lot of, making sure that things are working properly and writing down all your codes and cards and this, that, and the other thing. At this point in my life, it's almost meditative. It's quite relaxing to navigate through these menus and build a piece of software without having to actually code anything. Let's discuss for a sec the change here, because remember we're adding, we're not changing the value of. So I'll say something like if the value of workflow.response2 is equal to A, add 5 to the value of workflow.score. And this is how we're going to get that addition. Now, of course, all that we did was add this plus sign, but if you're not a developer, you wouldn't know that. And so instead, Botpress just does it for you. And I'll talk a bit about generating code in a sec. But first, I'm just going to go ahead and do A, B, and C. In this one, C will be the correct answer. So I'm going to say this is 10, and B will be incorrect, so I'll say it's 0. And then I'll copy all of this code again and move it into the next node because that one's got to be identical. But of course, this one's going to be response 3 because we are asking the third question. And then maybe in this one, I'll say that A is the correct answer, B is partially correct, and C is incorrect. You can, of course, change these numbers to whatever you need. It's very arbitrary here. So, of course, as you would in real life, the numbers don't mean anything. As a great game show host once said, the numbers are all made up, so nothing matters. What's the minimum needed info for a production-ready site for a mechanic shop? If their website is enough, it's somewhat robust. A production-ready bot. Capture code, you ask a good question. I think in most cases, chatbots can be a lot simpler than we think they need to be. And I would recommend, if it can do a simple knowledge base answer, a knowledge base query, I would start with that and not do anything else. Reason for that is it's quickest to implement. And so if you're in the software space, time to value is really important. So if you can get a bot running on your client's website, I'm assuming you're doing this for a client, but if you're a mechanic, also cool. But you want to be able to minimize that time to value. So if you can get a bot on a website in 5 minutes, which is really how long it should take to build a knowledge base bot, then great. That's fantastic. Yeah, for a client. So in that case, I would say you should have kind of a stock knowledge answering bot that you can just pop on their website. And then the thing about chatbot projects is that these are always ongoing living things. So every business is going to have different needs. Some of them will want them to book appointments. Some of them will want them just to provide questions to answers. Some of them will want them to provide refunds. So you could either get those expectations from the get-go, or what I would prefer to do is say something like, start from the simplest possible set of actions. In most cases, that's just answering questions that you're tired of answering on the phone, and then moving up from there. When your client is ready to say something like, okay, I'm ready to make my chatbot, more powerful, or it can do more tasks. I think something, Capture Co, I do not know how old you are, but if you've been around the internet for long enough as I have, you will remember a time when people didn't want to put 30. Okay, yeah. So if you've been around for the internet presumably as long as I have, and a lot of people, when the internet was first a thing, didn't want to put too much information on their website. So if you were a business running a website, you certainly didn't conduct transactions on the internet. You certainly didn't book appointments on the internet, but you had a website, maybe just providing information like, here's where my store is, and this is my phone number, and that's it. And that's what I would recommend, is to do like the bare minimum that your client is comfortable with. And then as they grow more confident in their ability to use their chatbot to generate value for their business, then you can add on from there. That won't work for everybody, but if I were freelancing and providing bots for people, that's what I would do. Why? Because going whole hog at the beginning is fine, but it's more work on your part, and it's more work on their side, the client side, to kind of buy into your project. We want to reduce the time to value. So if you're, let's say you say I'm going to spend 5 minutes. I'll put a bot on your website that can answer the questions you normally ask on the phone. You get asked on the phone. And then 3-4 weeks later, your client is like, wow, I receive 20% fewer phone calls than I normally do. That's fantastic. I'm really happy. Then you can say something like, do you want to now add the ability to book appointments or process refunds or check order status? Really the kind of typical e-retail things that we see. So that's what I would recommend. Are there industry standards of cost for freelance work such as this? Capture Co, yes and no. I will say the first thing, both to you and to anyone in the audience or watching this recording later in the future, is that we provide guidance through the Botpress partnership program. So we partner with bot builders. We certify them to make sure that you are, an additional layer of credibility in providing Botpress services. If you are a part of the Botpress partnership program, we can provide you guidance on things like costs for freelance work. If you're not interested in the program, or maybe you want to give that away to join at a later point in the future, do take a look at places like Upwork and Fiverr, where I know for a fact that people provide Botpress services. So you can take a gander at places like that. But if you are interested at all in the partnership program, do check it out. It's botpress.com/partners. You'll find it on our website. Ashwin asks, is there any way to do an intent-based transition with a custom query or something like event.preview in a node different from the original input capture node? Let me make sure I've understood you correctly. You want to do an intent-based transition like these, but you want to do it in a place where away from the original capture. You are correct in assuming that you would have to rely on the AI transition. So here, this field doesn't support variables. You can see that nothing is popping up here, nor is it popping up if I do curly braces. But that's what the AI transition is for you to kind of do those custom manipulations or custom transitions. Where did my code go? Here, let's replace that code over there. This code has disappeared on me, and then we'll wrap up this teaching bot. Okay, so I'm just going ahead and fixing these, and maybe I'll change the values for these as well, so they're not always the same. Students have a tendency to game these things, as one would expect. All right, so here's what we've built so far. We've built the first phase of the test or the quiz, where the student is telling you that they're ready to take the test or quiz. Then we've gone ahead and built the test or quiz itself. I'm just going to say test, just to make our lives easier. And then the next thing we want to do is float our results to them. So here we'll say I'll use a text card to say something like, your final score on this test was workflow.score out of a possible 30 points. I hope you did well. AI transition doesn't have utterances, so it's proving a bit unreliable in my case. I would play around with the prompts that you're giving to the AI transition card. Although I will say that, like, for those of you watching the recording of this later on, or those of you in the audience, I think one of the things that we're very aware of right now is that AI-based actions where your bot is using GPT to perform some kind of like semantic interpretation of what the user has said are not always reliable, or like they'll be customizable based on like what business you work in. So what we want to do is provide a way for you to teach your bot, hey, you did this right, or hey, you did this wrong, continue, do something else in the future, or continue doing stuff like this. If you're familiar with the machine learning world, you're looking at something like RLHF, reinforcement learning with human feedback, or you can automate this by maybe doing like a thumbs up, thumbs down that you float to the user. We're currently investigating the best way for you to do this in a way that doesn't provide any onus on the person chatting with your bot, and then also makes it easier for you to do this. So you don't actually have to be like a machine learning expert to do a version of like continuous learning or RLHF. Of course, like all things, I don't have like a timeline for that, but I do know that this is something that we find GPT, both like as well internally, sometimes unreliable for these kinds of tasks, particularly if like you've got like I'm a gamer and I'm trying to set up bots for like my various gaming communities, but because a lot of the wording is so arcane, let's say, a lot of the times GPT is like, I don't know what's going on here, I don't know what to do with that. And so it would be really nice to be able to kind of like manually train the bot to behave in a way that you want it to. I will take this opportunity to plug Botpress's appearance on a podcast called Final Frontier. If you're not familiar with it, it's an AI podcast. It's like a great one in the AI ML space. We'll be on that at the end of this week. We tweeted about it, so check out the Botpress Twitter for that. But if you're interested in this topic, we will be discussing it there. So I will take this opportunity to plug that for you. Okay. We are coming up on the end of the stream, and I do want to finish this build for the one person on our YouTube comments who really wanted to see this. I'm doing this one for you. So I'm going to go ahead and insert a record here. And of course, what we want to do is save the results that the user has sent into quiz table. So we're going to go ahead and use the insert record card, which takes some variables that you define and saves them to a table that you choose. So in this case, we'll choose the table to be the one table that we have here. And we'll go ahead and select the appropriate variables. So response 1, student name, response 2, response 3, and then finally final score is workflow.score. These are in the incorrect order because they reflect the order in which you created the variables. That's why that is the way it is. And then finally, we're going to go ahead and do some expression-based transitions. In other words, like when I define the conditions for the transition. So I'm going to go ahead and place them here. So I'll use AI here to generate the transition for me. If the value of workflow.score is between 0 and 9, I hit enter, and we see the transitions written for me. And I'll just do that 2 more times to account for all the other possible options. So if the value of workflow.score is between 10 and 19, and finally, if the value of workflow.score is between 20 and 30. I know which kind of student I would have been in which one of these 3 buckets I would have fallen into. I'm curious to know what you all think about which one I would have been, and also which one you would have been when you were in high school or elementary school, I suppose. Here, I'll call this 09. I'll call this one 1019, and this one will be 2030. And then, of course, we'll just send an appropriate message for each of these. So this one was, I think you're failing is what I called it. This one's like, I'll just say so. And then finally, this last one is going to be excellent. And of course, you can get creative with the messages you send here. You can send GIFs, you can send videos. If the student is failing, for example, you can send them additional resources that they can use to study. Kind of the sky is the limit for what you can do here. You can totally get creative with both the prompts and then the messages you send and the media that you also send. And let's finally go ahead and let's take this darn quiz together. I'll say hi. In this case, my name will be Robert Stew. We'll make sure this works. I am ready to begin this quiz. I'll pick some random answers. Oh, hey, why didn't that work? That didn't work because it didn't provide any answers. Always good to test your bot, folks. And we'll try that again. This is why the emulator exists. I'll do B, A, B, and my final score was 10 out of 30 or so. And of course, just to make sure that the last thing is working, we'll pop into quiz table. We see Robert Stew got a 5 out of 30 on this quiz, and we're done. So that's how I would set up a very, very simple quiz on Botpress. It would be a simple project to do to pop into a website or like a Google Workspace or something to then give to your students. If you are the user in the YouTube comments that suggested this, I hope you find this useful. Maybe you're watching the recording of this in the future at some point, but I hope you find this enjoyable. And actually, if you are an educator and you have other requests like these, I'm always interested, both because I like to know what people are doing in Botpress outside of the kind of usual use cases, but equally because I think that these kinds of projects are really good at introducing beginners to Botpress and kind of like the basic concepts. So it's always really useful to see these kinds of things in action. So if you've got requests for like builds that you want me to do like this, do let me know, because I find these to actually be very useful, both for myself to understand like what kinds of questions you guys have, and then also, what are you using Botpress for? Who can say? I just accidentally learned that disabling the transition in every option makes life 100 times easier if they transition to the same node. Yes, exactly. If you're just capturing information, there's no need for that transition to be active. Exactly. See, it's great to learn things. That is going to be it for this week's lesson. I hope that you enjoyed this kind of like different than usual educational kind of assessment bot. If you've got any final questions, let me know. I will be hanging around the Discord server as usual, so you know where to find me as always. But thanks for hopping around today, guys. I really appreciated the stream. I hope that you found this useful. If you're watching the recording of this later on at YouTube at some point, I hope that you found this this was what you were looking for, and if it wasn't, come find us on the Discord server and let me know what you'd like to see, and maybe we can build it together. I hope that you all have a wonderful rest of your day or morning or evening. Perhaps it's Wednesday for some of you based on the magic of time zones. And I will see you next Tuesday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time for another edition of the Botpress Basics. Bye, everyone, and happy bot building.